In the pouring rain, a cop arrests a homeless black veteran for seeking shelter, unaware he's the estranged father of the city's new mayor. As protests erupt and family secrets surface, her fight for justice threatens to unravel everything she's built. What happens next will shock even the most seasoned. But let's start at the beginning. The rain pounded relentlessly on the cobblestones of Eastwood Square, transforming the normally bustling plaza into a desolate expanse. Shops with rain-streaked windows stood as silent witnesses to the scene unfolding beneath their awnings. Officer Kevin Walsh, a heavy-set man in his early 50s, drove his patrol car slowly through the square. Known for his no-nonsense approach to maintaining order, he prided himself on clearing the area of vagrants and undesirables. His sharp eyes caught a figure huddled beneath a narrow shop canopy, clutching a threadbare blanket against the cold. The man, elderly and gaunt, was shifting his belongings, a worn duffel bag and a small stack of papers, to shield them from the downpour. His hair, streaked with gray, clung to his forehead, and his clothes, damp and ragged, clung to his thin frame. Walsh pulled his car to a stop, the blue and red lights painting the wet pavement in bursts of color. As the siren chirped, a few pedestrians slowed, their curiosity piqued. "Sir," Walsh barked as he stepped out, his boots splashing in a growing puddle. "You can't stay here." Startled, the man looked up, his bloodshot eyes filled with weariness. "I'm not causing trouble, officer," he replied hoarsely. "Just trying to stay out of the rain." Walsh's lips curled into a sneer. "Loitering's loitering. Stand up. Let's go." He grabbed the man's frail arm, and in the process, the man's bag slipped from his grasp, spilling its contents onto the ground. A leather-bound Bible, its edges frayed, slid across the wet stone, accompanied by a small photograph encased in a plastic sleeve. The photo depicted a younger man with a radiant smile, standing beside a woman holding a boy in her arms. "What's this?" Walsh muttered, shoving the items carelessly back into the bag as the man flinched, his hand outstretched in a silent plea. Passers-by gathered, their umbrellas forming a haphazard canopy. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Among them, Sandra Martinez, a journalist with a knack for exposing injustice, raised her camera. "This is how you serve and protect," she shouted, her voice cutting through the rain. Walsh, unperturbed, cuffed the man and shoved him into the squad car. "Another day at work," he muttered, slamming the door and driving away, oblivious to the storm his actions had unleashed. In the dimly lit precinct, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and damp paperwork. Officer Kevin Walsh sat hunched at his desk, his fingers tapping out routine details on an outdated keyboard. Across the desk, Richard Ellis sat silently, his hands trembling slightly in his lap, the cuffs removed, but leaving red marks on his wrists. "Name?" Walsh barked, barely glancing up. The man hesitated, his voice soft but steady. Richard Ellis." Walsh's fingers paused mid-keystroke. The name struck a faint chord in his memory, but he brushed it off with a scoff. "You don't look familiar. Any priors?" "No, sir," Richard replied, his tone carrying a weary dignity. "Not that it matters to you." Walsh didn't bother responding, returning to his typing with mechanical indifference. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, casting harsh shadows that deepened the lines on Richard's weathered face. Meanwhile, outside the confines of the station, the world was stirring. Sandra Martinez's video, raw and unfiltered, was rapidly gaining traction on social media. Its caption, "Veteran arrested for seeking shelter in the rain," struck a nerve, sparking a flurry of angry comments, retweets, and hashtags demanding justice. By nightfall, the video had reached every corner of the city and beyond. In her sleek office downtown, Mayor-elect Aaliyah Ellis sat frozen in her chair, her eyes glued to the grainy footage. The muted sound of her aide's voice reporting updates blurred into the background as her breath quickened. There, in the dimly lit police car, was a face she hadn't seen in 2 decades. Older, more haggard, but unmistakable. Her father. "Aaliyah," her aide repeated, stepping closer. "The press is asking for a statement about the incident. What should we say?" Aaliyah stood abruptly, her face a mix of shock and determination. "I'm going to the station." She grabbed her coat, her mind racing with questions she hadn't dared to ask for years. The father she had long believed lost to his demons was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, and now it was her responsibility to confront both the man and the system that had put him there. The precinct's buzzing atmosphere came to a screeching halt when Aaliyah Ellis, clad in a sleek trench coat and heels that clicked like thunder against the tiled floor, stormed in. Her arrival was a tempest of purpose, her presence magnetic as heads turned to watch the drama unfold. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, their usual bravado tempered by the unmistakable authority radiating from the mayor-elect. Behind his desk, Officer Kevin Walsh froze, mid-sip of his coffee, the styrofoam cup shaking slightly in his hand. He blinked in confusion as Aaliyah marched straight up to him, her eyes blazing. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Who?" Walsh stammered, his confidence faltering. "The man you arrested today for existing. Where is he?" she repeated, her tone brooking no argument. Walsh scrambled to straighten up, his coffee sloshing dangerously close to the edge of the desk. "Ma'am, we detained him for loitering. He's in holding." "I'm not ma'am. I'm Mayor-elect Ellis," she snapped, her words a hammer blow to the room's tense silence. "And that man is my father." Gasps rippled through the precinct like a wave. Walsh's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as the weight of her words sank in. "You better explain yourself, officer," Aaliyah demanded, her gaze searing through him. I didn't know," Walsh stuttered, his bravado crumbling. "He didn't say." "He didn't have to," she thundered, slamming her palm against his desk. "Do you think you're above the law, harassing innocent citizens? What kind of officer arrests an elderly man trying to stay dry in the rain?" Walsh shrank under her fury, his shoulders hunching as he struggled to find a defense. "You're lucky I don't fire you on the spot." Aaliyah cut him off, her voice echoing through the stunned room. As Walsh grappled with his spiraling mistake, the precinct's PR team scrambled into action. But it was already too late. Outside, the muffled roar of an angry crowd could be heard. Protesters waved signs, their chants demanding accountability for Walsh's actions. The video had sparked a firestorm, and it was clear that both Walsh's career and the precinct's reputation were hanging by a thread. In a private room, Aaliyah finally faced her father. Richard sat hunched, guilt and weariness etched into his features. "Why didn't you reach out?" she asked, her voice trembling. He sighed. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Tears filled her eyes. "You're my father. You don't have to earn my love." Their reunion was bittersweet, the weight of lost years hanging between them. Outside, the protests swelled as activists rallied against systemic racism and police brutality. The next morning, Aaliyah held a press conference, standing beside her father. She announced sweeping reforms, including an investigation into Walsh's conduct and new policies to protect vulnerable citizens. Walsh, demoted and facing public scrutiny, grappled with his actions. Watching the press conference, he realized the man he dismissed as just another vagrant was a human being with a family, a story, and dignity. As the city buzzed with discussions about justice and accountability, Richard Ellis, now living with his daughter, began to heal. And Aaliyah's fight for change only grew stronger, fueled by a personal mission to ensure no one else would endure what her father had.